Let's talk about Mexico. Not the tourist brochure Mexico. Not the all-inclusive margarita package Mexico. The real Mexico. The Mexico the US and Canada can't live without, and definitely can't control. The Mexico that sits at the center of the Western Hemisphere like a giant hinge holding the whole door up. You're about to see why. Hi, dear friends, and welcome to the Eagle's View. I'm your host, Tim Suleiman, also known as the Bigger Picture Tim, and in this channel we study and analyze open source world news, global events, and trends. My goal is to help people put together the disparate, fragmented, and kaleidoscopic news we're being fed on a daily basis and learn to see the invisible, read between the lines, understand what's not being said or what we are being distracted away from, all to get the bigger telescopic picture. In other words, I would like you to be able to see the eagle's view. This is what this program and my segments are all about. Election season always rolls of the same script. Secure the border, build the wall, stop the chaos. But here's what doesn't get said out loud. Large portions of the US-Mexico border operate in ways neither Washington nor Mexico City fully controls. That's not speculation. Multiple open source reports and testimonies from US agencies acknowledge significant cartel influence on smuggling routes on both sides of the line. Translation? The border isn't a clean, straight line. It's a network, and cartels build a big piece of it. This is the uncomfortable backdrop for everything else. If you ask the average American which conflict has cost the most US lives in the last decade, they'd probably say Afghanistan or Iraq. And they'd be wrong. Annual fentanyl-linked deaths driven heavily by supply chains that run through Mexico are 70,000 plus per year. Compare that to 6,886 total US military deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. 1 year of opioid carnage outweighs 2 decades of warfare. This is why Washington's rhetoric about cartels is escalating. You don't lose 70,000 people a year and pretend nothing's happening. But Mexico isn't a puppet state. It's a sovereign nation with leverage, economic, geographic, demographic, and political. And that leverage is growing. This part blows people's minds. Most Americans still think everything comes from China. Well, not anymore. For the first time in modern history, Mexico passed China as the United States' top trade partner. The supply chains that keep American shelves stocked, factories running, and inflation in check now flow straight through Mexican territory. Meaning, if Mexico sneezes, the US economy catches pneumonia. Washington can yell all it wants about security, but it can't afford to break the economic lifeline. This is the contradiction the news never explains. So allow me to do the honors. Let's break another assumption. Cartels aren't back alley gangs with rusty AKs. They're multinational enterprises now. Open source estimates put their annual revenue somewhere between 25 and 35 billion US dollars, with a B, billion. Mexico's entire defense budget sits around 15 to 17 billion. The numbers don't lie. This does not mean the Mexican state is losing or collapsing. That's sensationalism. But it doesn't mean the government is dealing with non-state actors whose financial firepower is often larger than the institutions meant to stop them. This is why the Mexican military is so deeply woven into domestic security policy, and why the US can't simply just go and fix it. It's not a Hollywood movie. It's a complicated, sovereign relationship. And here's where the things get modern. You'd think drone warfare is something happening far away, like in places like Ukraine, Gaza, or Caucasus. But Latin America has its own drone evolution happening as we speak. And it's just turned deadly in a way that should worry everyone. For example, recently Brazilian police launched operations in Rio de Janeiro's criminal-controlled favelas. Multiple officers were killed, not by gunfire in street battles, by FPV drones. First-person view drones. The same type you see racing through forests on YouTube, except these were weaponized, dropping explosives, targeting police with precision. This isn't gang warfare from the 1990s. This is a battlefield-level tactics on civilian streets. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Brazilian security forces are now openly discussing concerns about individuals who may have traveled to Ukraine, either as volunteers in the International Legion or through other channels, gaining hands-on experience with military-grade drone operations, then returning back to Brazil and applying that knowledge in criminal contexts. Let me be clear. This is not confirmed cartel training pipelines. This is not proven operational coordination. This is what Brazilian police and security analysts are worried about based on the sophistication they're seeing on the ground. What we do know for certain is Ukraine has become the world's live fire drone tactics school. Thousands of volunteers from dozens of countries have fought there. Many have learned how to operate FPV drones in combat conditions. Some of those individuals will go home eventually. And when you see real police getting hit by weaponized drones with surgical precision, the question isn't paranoid anymore. It's practical. Mexican criminal groups have already been documented using long-range surveillance drones, FPV-style racing drones, improvised explosive dropping drones, jamming equipment, encrypted communication gear, and basic anti-drone countermeasures. This isn't speculation. Law enforcement footage, open-source investigations, and academic reports all show the trend. So when people ask, could cartel operatives gain combat drone experience abroad and bring it back? The answer is, we don't need to prove it happened to acknowledge it's strategically possible. And Brazil just showed us what that possibility looks like in action. You don't need armies overseas anymore. You need YouTube tutorials, off-the-shelf parts, and the one person who knows what they're doing. That's scary. That's the modern threat environment, and everyone knows it. Now, coming back to Canada and Mexico. Canada talks out of both sides of its polite mouth. On one hand, travel advisories, warnings about violence, and exercise high caution alerts for tourists. On the other hand, Ottawa signs massive cooperation agreements with Mexico, economic partnership expansions, joint security initiatives, supply chain integration, training programs, and an elevated bilateral relationship ahead of the USMCA negotiations. So Canadians get told, be careful going to Cancun, while their government deepens economic ties with Mexico more than ever. That's because Mexico matters. Not emotionally, strategically. So why is Mexico so important in the Western Hemisphere? Well, for that, let's zoom out. The globe is reorganizing itself into regional blocks. US versus China, Russia versus Europe, Middle East reshuffling, Africa rising, South America fragmenting. And North America? It's slowly turning into a regional fortress. Shared supply chains, shared trade agreements, shared immigration pressure, shared security challenges. At the center of this is Mexico. Not as a junior player, not as a satellite, but as a gatekeeper of labor, of manufacturing, of migration routes, of trade routes, flows of energy, and yes, of security risks. If Mexico collapses, North America collapses too. If Mexico stabilizes, North America rises as a unified powerhouse. You can love Mexico or fear Mexico, but you can't ignore Mexico. And here's the truth the headlines won't tell you. Mexico isn't the side quest of North American geopolitics. It's the main storyline. The US depends on it. Canada depends on it. The entire Western Hemisphere depends on it. And as technology spreads, drones, encrypted comms, digital smuggling networks, the old ideas of border security don't make sense anymore. The world's changed. Mexico changed with it. Now the rest of the continent has to catch up. Welcome to the new map of the Americas. Knowing our survival rests on fragile circuitry, whether that's supply chains, drone networks, or border systems, can spark deep anxiety. I'm a coach who helps people transform to rise above fears like this, to experience permanent peace of mind and not panic. Book a call with me if you need help. The link is in the description below. Meanwhile, my friends, let's continue to soar like eagles. Continue to observe the bigger picture from the sky, and don't let disparate news fragments obscure your grasp of what's going on. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.